Ryan Day talked on Wednesday, day one. Same with Mel Tucker, and I'm sure we'll mention maybe him at the end and some quick hitters. But Ryan Day, had the probably disadvantage of going first, and then Jim Harbaugh's the next day. He gets to see and hear about maybe how some of the reaction to some things were. But Ryan Day believes it should be considered. And he was asked about this. He didn't bring it up on his own, but it should be considered that the Ohio State-Michigan game could be moved off of the final regular season week heading into 2024, or I guess a couple of years down the line, because they already have the schedule, because they could play two weeks in a row. They could play 3 times in 5 weeks or 3 times in the season, given that we're moving to a 12-team playoff. Then Jim Harbaugh says, hey, we'll expect it at the end of the regular season. It's kind of become a tradition. Didn't necessarily have much of an opinion on it, didn't go super in-depth on it, which is probably the smart play. I mean, you get people kind of, the social media reaction to Ryan Day because he's 1-2 against Michigan. It's kind of easy to clown on him a little bit, but your guys' thoughts on really, because it is fair to consider it, I think, for sure. I don't know that you move it. I probably wouldn't be in favor of that, but it's definitely something to think about. But your thoughts on how each guy handled it, and maybe your opinion on when it should be played.
It's funny because I think a lot of other fan bases, and maybe Megan, our producer, can weigh in here with the arrogance of assuming that you get to that game and it's going to, both teams are still going to have an opportunity just because they're so good at the end of the year that maybe they're going to be good enough to, already have Big Ten championship game clinched, So I don't think that's going to happen very often, guys, especially in the revamped Big Ten. So, yes, these 2 programs are on the top of the world right now. There's no guarantee that it'll remain that way. You look at what happened to Michigan for so many years. It takes one bad hire. I don't think that Ohio State will ever allow that to happen. They've become one of those Southern, by any means necessary, programs where, football means everything to the school. So, but we've seen it happen at Michigan, and we've seen it happen at Ohio State before. We've seen it happen at Notre Dame. We've seen it happen everywhere. So there are no guarantees. But to me, it's, it's tradition. You got to keep that game the last game of the year, flat out. Not just that, but everything in the season builds up to that game. There's no rival on the schedule that compares to Ohio State. It's not even close. There's no close second, fellas. This is the game, and to me, no, there's something wrong about it. And I remember when Dave Brandon was exploring that as Michigan's athletic director, 10 years ago, and everybody's like, this is ridiculous. And I still feel the same way about it. If you have to play back-to-back weeks, you play back-to-back weeks, and so be it.
Yeah, to me, I mean, it's the discussion is warranted, right? Especially with the knowledge of the fact that these TV networks just have so much more influence than they ever have. And if it's back-to-back weeks, they'll take the ratings for both. But, from a drama perspective, if you're looking at, sometimes they could play 3 times in a season if they meet in, the expanded 12-team playoff. And I think you just kind of roll the dice and take your chances with that. I think it's worth a discussion. It's worth exploring. Other big rivalries play in mid-October. But, the more I think about it, it is just – the scope of Michigan's season every year is, and this works to their detriment sometimes, and sometimes it's, works to building excitement, is, are you going to be ready for, this climb? Are you going to be ready for that last week of the year and what it brings? And I just think there is a chance it would be an overcorrection. I know they've moved some other rivalries around in other conferences. I think Florida State, Miami was one that got moved around. A couple others, and the doomsday scenario, so to speak, of the 2 teams meeting 2 weeks in a row. I'm not sure it's ever really happened. So if it does, it does. Honestly, from a player and a coach standpoint, they'll play it on September 1st. If you ask them to, they'll play it, in March. They'll play it whenever it's played. But yeah, right now, in the here and now, I think it's I'll stop short of saying it's hubris to admit that you'd be there 2 weeks in a row. But listen, I mean, you've got Luke Fickell at Wisconsin now, and I think they're going to win fairly quickly and be a factor. And you've got USC coming in, you've got UCLA coming in. Matt Rule, I think, is going to win. No, maybe not as quickly at Nebraska, but they're going to be a factor out there. So I do think with the way things are going with the new scheduling format, with the caliber of coaches that are in this conference now, and the fact that your schedule isn't quite as set in stone year to year as it used to be, in terms of, okay, maybe you go a couple years without seeing Penn State or Wisconsin or what have you. I think there's going to be a little more parity in this Big Ten than people are giving it credit for. And, I feel pretty confident that maybe Michigan and Ohio State is more often than not one of those teams playing for a Big Ten title. But like I said, I think it's a little, don't correct something that you don't, this is another quote Jim Harbaugh had. Don't fix something that you don't know if it's broken yet. So play it out and see what happens. The Big Ten's only going to do these schedules 2 years at a time. I think there's probably going to be a little more expansion with the Pac-12 falling apart. We could see Oregon and Washington kind of rotating in here. But yeah, I do think in the here and now, it's a discussion worth having. It's something that makes you kind of scratch your chin and look up at the sky. But I think it's just that right now is a discussion point.
Yeah, and to Ryan Day's credit too, he said it's flexible. They set the schedule 2 years out, and then they're going to reassess. I did find Blake Corum's quote kind of amusing, and I know people kind of attribute it to him calling Ryan Day or saying that Ryan Day's comments was loser talk. I think it was a little different than that, but he did say it would be loser talk to suggest that they wouldn't go as hard in the first game knowing they're going to play the next week. He said, not my guys. My guys wouldn't do that. So, but, that one went viral, I think, on Twitter as well. And, of course, Blake Corum won't be here for any of that anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But it is funny when guys, we talked about this on the way home too, when guys get asked about things, these are largely veteran guys that are sent down there and they get asked about things in the future of college football that they will not be here for.